Hello and welcome to P03, the practicum lesson about verbal scaffolding and task before text. Our question of the day today is, how can we use verbal scaffolding in Microteaching 1 to promote output and interaction? Keep in mind that Microteaching 1 is about activating schema, mostly content schema, about what the students already know about the topic. So in order to do that, there will be a lot of interaction on their part as they generate their own ideas. Your objectives for this lesson is you will be able to identify verbal scaffolding techniques in a recorded lesson. And to be clear, that is a recorded lesson within this recorded lesson and within your materials of a teacher actually teaching using these techniques within the context of a Vietnamese classroom. And you will be able to match individual techniques to possible teacher talk to initiate the technique. So in other words, as the students are doing these things, or rather, in order to get the students to do these things, the teacher needs to use a certain kind of teacher talk, and it tends to look like the patterns that I'll show you today. In this class, you're going to need your notebook. It can be your methodology notebook or another notebook for your other classes, just kind of to take notes about what you learned today. You are also going to need your classroom interactions chart, and at a certain point there is going to be time to use your phone to record yourself doing something that is relevant for the first micro teaching. So a quick review of the verbal scaffolding techniques, and a reminder that scaffolding is about output and interaction, as I said. So this describes what students are doing after the teacher initiates the technique. So the students are repeating, the students are answering individually, the students are asking each other questions, the students are giving opinions, the students are personalizing, summarizing, paraphrasing after the teacher's prompting. So the one exception might be cueing, wherein the person doing the cueing is actually the teacher, is cueing that utterance, the expected output from the student by giving the first letter, the first sound, etc. Requesting help is something that the students do after the teacher asks them to, and the same for giving a complete sentence. Now let's look at individual techniques, and in order to do that, I'm going to actually show you, including my own body language and gestures for these particular techniques. The first is, of course, repetition. Repetition, repeat after me. So the person repeating is the student. And what we often see is that we're repeating a phrase or a question or a single word. Also, you might have heard this expression, choral repetition. That's everyone repeat after me. Everyone repeat after me. So all the students repeat what the teacher says, and that word comes from the word choir. So all your students are repeating in this way. Notice that the MIC technique that is similar is MIC repeat, with a slightly different word form, and we did that intentionally so you wouldn't be confused, because MIC repeat, of course, is when the teacher repeats to make that input comprehensible. Our next technique, you've seen this before, answering individually. The teacher is asking an individual student a question and the student answers. You may have also seen the shorthand T to S1, Again, the teacher is directly asking an individual student. When you do this technique, please be sure to use the student's name, because when you don't use the name, another student might answer. In fact, when you do use the name, another student might answer sometimes, and you just have to kind of say, ooh, there are a lot of Jiheis in this class. That's answering individually. Our next technique is the S1 to S2 questions. That's where you say, Jihei, can you please ask Blue, blah, blah, blah. In this context, Jihei would be asking Blue. One student asks another student, and you've seen the shorthand S1 to S2. It's not quite the same as pair work, which is all the students asking their partners at the same time. Giving opinions. Giving opinions. So when a student gives an opinion after the teacher's prompting, this is the interaction that we're using. The reason that this is important is because everybody likes to talk about how they feel about a particular subject. When you give opinions, you're really expressing yourself in the language, which is a goal of our English classrooms. And you'll find it's also a goal of English as an international language when you cover that topic in ICC class. So, what do you think about this topic, Jisoo? And she explains what she thinks. That's giving opinions. Personalizing is a technique that covers a lot of ground. Basically, it's any time you ask your students to talk about themselves. That's personalizing. You might have noticed the previous technique, giving opinions. That could also be personalizing if they're giving opinions about themselves, for example. Personalizing, tell me about your family. What's your favorite color? How many times have you traveled outside of Korea? Any of this would be personalizing. And of course, our clever little image. I'm going to keep talking about myself. How else would you know how awesome I am? Summarizing. Summarizing is another key technique that we can ask students to summarize new information or instructions. Basically, when we talk about summarizing, that's giving the main idea. Sometimes it's using fewer words, and sometimes it's often using fewer words. You want to summarize it, you make it shorter. Keep in mind that summarizing is a technique for intermediate and above. So in the first micro-teaching, you would not need to ask students to summarize. You might give them a hat that says they love to summarize. I don't know. Pretty cool gift. Paraphrase. Now, paraphrasing sounds similar to summarizing. Here's a key difference. It's not necessarily fewer words. It's using different words to express the same idea. Paraphrasing emphasizes that you're using your own words. Summarizing, usually fewer words. Okay. For example, if a cow says moo, another cow might say, I just said that. Use your own words. I just said that. Please paraphrase. Cueing. Well, here we have animation that's slightly out of order. Cueing is where the teacher prompts the student to say something by providing the first sound, the first letter, the first word, etc. So the teacher might say b b b b b, and the student, you guessed it, says baseball. You can also cue with the first letter. You can cue with the first word of a sentence, or the first few words of a sentence, and your goal is to help them to remember what they need to say here. Requesting help. This is another verbal scaffolding technique. Sometimes students are struggling. So the teacher may encourage them to ask someone for help. Something to keep in mind, this is also a classroom learning strategy. So students may eventually do it without the teacher's prompting. And that's a beautiful thing when it happens. So the student will attempt to answer on her own and then say, Minji, can you help me? And then Minji helps by encouraging her or providing the answer, and it's lovely when they can do this on their own. Giving a complete sentence. This is when the teacher responds to a one-word answer or phrase by asking for a complete sentence. Now, this is most appropriate for your novices, novice mid, novice high, because remember, the novices are very comfortable with memorized words, memorized phrases, and they may not be producing those full sentences yet, but when they begin producing full sentences sort of automatically, that's really a trait of the intermediates. Intermediates will produce a lot of complete sentences. So when you have intermediate level students, this is not so necessary. You may encourage more elaboration or more complex ideas from intermediates, but if an intermediate answers with a single word, well, that's really a trait of advanced or even native speakers' speech. We don't really speak in complete sentences, so I wouldn't do this with intermediates necessarily. Next, you have your teacher talk task. This is available for you in your Google Classroom post. And what you're going to do is you're going to match the techniques to potential teacher talk. In order to edit the box and write the correct letter, please double click it when you're in there. And please take a moment to do that now. Your next task is a video task. You're going to watch the video task. It will be linked with your post. It's also linked directly in this Google Slides presentation up here if you would rather click that if you're following along that way. And there is a checklist that is attached, and this checklist, again, you can double click the analysis questions. You should be able to edit the checklist itself directly and answer the questions about the verbal scaffolding techniques that you see this teacher use, and any other interesting or useful techniques that you notice that might be from another part of our classroom interactions chart. Please take a moment to do that now. This week's teaching basics is a very important concept called task before text. So when we give students a new task, it's critical that we give them instructions and check comprehension before we hand out the material. So for example, if you have some kind of handout activity, you would want to give instructions with MICs, so that includes dual coding, maybe MIC repeat, MIC rephrase. You have keyword instructions on the whiteboard, and you check comprehension, perhaps by saying, everybody ask your partners, what are we going to do first, what are we going to do second, eliciting those answers, and then providing the handouts. The reason for this is that as soon as you give them materials, they tend to be more interested in the materials you give them than in the teacher's instructions, so they will perhaps be focused more on the materials that you give them, or they could be jumping right in because they're eager beavers and they want to complete the task before they really understand how to do it. And of course, if students start working at different paces and if students don't really understand, you're going to spend a lot of your time walking around and clarifying instructions with them rather than giving them that quality time on task, which is a concept you'll learn about later, which is basically the time that students spend actually working on tasks. And just a quick note here about task before text. It doesn't have to be a physical handout or reading task. This is the same concept that we employ when we use a listening task or a speaking task or anything, because we always give instructions first and then we check comprehension and then we let them do the task. So very important, particularly when you're working with novices. They need crystal clear instructions. Remember that if you ever ask them to do something in your microteaching. Here's just a quick update on microteaching 1. If you were scheduled to teach this week, then we're just going to bump you to the next week. So week 4 is now week 5. Week 5 is now week 6. Now, in the event of another week of this distance learning, for your safety and ours, we will find a way to simulate microteaching in the online environment, the online context, next week. And I think we can do a useful simulation of that through online, asynchronous, recording, and live online interaction. So in case we need to do that, do not panic. We'll have an alternative for you. So please watch for the updates. And an additional reminder, when we're in microteaching 1, keep in mind that this is mostly content schema, because we're talking about, they're talking about what they already know about that idea or that topic. And also please remember to move generally from the known to the new. That's the idea. You don't get to the new really in MT1, but the general to the specific. Okay, and you're going to use your pictures and images about the general topic to lead them kind of to the specific topic. So for example, if your specific topic was winter sports, then you might want to start with generally sports in general and personalizing and activating schema in that way. Keep in mind too that there are no complicated tasks in this microteaching. There's no grammar focus, no form focus, and the activity, the new language activity or the new input source isn't even happening yet. So all you need to do is literally get them talking about what they already know about this topic using those interactions that you've studied. Now your task is going to be MT1 practice. So you're going to go from general to specific questions using your device. You can use your topic from MT1. You can use your topic from the last methodology class if you prefer, or from methodology 2 classes ago. We talked about a general topic like technology or travel or this kind of thing. You can use that one again if you prefer. But the idea here is, while recording yourself, you want to ask good questions. You want to move from the general to the specific. You want to personalize with your students. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate how to do that on the next slide. So I will demonstrate how to do this with a topic of my own, which is sports, something I'm pretty sure none of you are going to choose. So this is pretty safe, but it gives you the idea. Okay, so let's imagine that I am doing my doing the activity that I just asked you to do to prepare for my first micro teaching. And my topic is sports. Now, I would take my image. You can see the image on the screen, or you can look at this one that I've just pulled up on my phone. Okay? And if you do this in the real micro teaching, please try to project something onto the whiteboard nice and big. Don't just bring in an A4 piece of paper, because that'll be kind of hard to see. And certainly what I'm doing right now is okay for this activity, but not for the micro teaching. So keep that in mind. So starting with this image, what I would say is, all right, everybody, ask your partners, what do you see in the picture? What do you see in the picture? Okay, so we take a moment. Partners are asking partners, and I'm hearing some ideas. And then after a while, I do my attention getter. Okay, I could say that, or 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. And I say, all right, Kyungmin, what did your partner have to say? Okay, and she says, oh, Yeji said sports. I write sports on the whiteboard. It's like, okay, really general question, really easy question. Now let's personalize a little bit. Okay. Do you have a favorite sport? Have you ever played sports? Ask your shoulder partner. Ask your shoulder partner. Okay, so you give them time to discuss. Meanwhile, you're walking around, monitoring, giving them time to discuss. And then I would say, Hyo-san, what did your partners say? Notice when I ask them to tell me about their partner, that encourages active listening, not thinking about what I'm going to say necessarily. Okay? Okay. Her partner said, she says, my partner likes football. And I say, is that football or soccer? And I put it on the whiteboard. Okay. Now, Hyo-san, can you ask Shil the same question about her partner? And Shil says, my partner likes baseball. Okay. Now I ask her partner a question directly. I say, really? Haewon? You like soccer? Tell me about that. Have you ever played before? She says, yes, I played when I was a kid. Oh, cool. What's your favorite position? Blah, blah, blah. I'm personalizing. I'm getting them to say more. Soccer's on the whiteboard. Okay? And now I could go individually. I could say, can you ask Unji the same question? And Unji answers, and I put her answer, which is hockey, on the whiteboard. Okay, now, follow-up question. Okay, everybody, let's think pair share. Think pair share. First, let's think, what are the advantages of children playing soccer? What are the disadvantages of, or any sport? What are the advantages of children playing sports and disadvantages? Let's think for 1 minute, and then let's pair, tell our partner, and then we'll share with the whole class. Okay, so this is essentially what you're going to do here. You're going to ask similar questions, generally moving from the general to the specific, using different interactions. In your case, it could be just a number of questions. It could be 3 to 5 questions. I just want to see if you can use interactions to ask these questions about the general topic. All right. Then you will attach it to the document that's been given to you. For each student will get a copy. So you just attach your video to that. All right.